What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Fins Faithful Podcast, a special Tuesday edition. The Dolphins have been busy the last few days, making their final cuts to get down to their final initial 53, because there's going to be some movement in the next few days. Also, we're going to give you a little bit of a season outlook. We're going to go what we think kind of with the final roster set, how the 25 season might look. And there's nobody else better that this is somebody who I was excited when I found out we were having on the show. Jason told me somebody's work I admired for a very long time. He's an author, award-winning sports columnist, one of the top, and I mean this, one of the top in the country, and we're very honored and lucky to have him covering our local teams down here. That is from the Sun Sentinel, Dave Hyde. I know Jason's as excited as I am. Dave, thank you so much for spending your evening, giving us some of your time. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me. Busy day, a lot to talk about, right? Perfect, perfect time to show up.
All right, so let's just dive into it. Let's not waste any time. Today was the kind of the 53-man cut. Anything, Dave, that surprised you, or was it more yesterday? I know they only kept 8 offensive linemen. That surprised me a little bit. They signed Rasul Douglas. Anything that catch you off guard, or kind of what you expected today?
Yeah, I mean, small, I don't know, even surprises. They kept 6 receivers. I see why they did that. They kept 4 last year, so most teams keep 5. You know, the Rasul Butler signing, I don't know that was it was only a surprise in that it had been in the air for a while, and you thought, well, maybe it's just not going to happen. You know, the defensive end, you know, what happened there really wasn't a surprise once they signed Matthew Judon, because there's 4 rushers, and the 5th guy has to be. I just think it had to be Cameron Good because of special teams. They had to, you know, give some deference to special teams, and there it was. So, you know, they need a tight end, they need a running back still, unless they've done anything in the last hour, because I didn't have time to look before I jumped on here. So I assume that's going to be something. I assume they're still looking at cornerbacks to see who's out there, linemen. So we'll see. But I expect, like with a lot of teams, the bottom 5 of this roster is going to have some churning going with it for a while.
Yeah, the offensive line, they only kept 8. That, you know, we had a 53-man projection show, and it was tough coming up with the 8 names. I mean, it was more. Yeah. It said more about what's going on with the depth of the offensive line than anything else.
They got some injuries there too, so it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, because I'm not sure they have any depth at offensive line, and like you said, they kept 8, and then a couple of them are injured, and so we'll see. I'm curious to see where this all goes with that.
Yeah.
News hit that Kendall Lamb was cut from the Eagles. Do you think there might be, I know there was like a retirement potential last year. You think he might be brought back? Is that a candidate to come on back to Miami?
Well, when he was cut, I was looking at my watch saying, okay, 3, 2, 1, and it never happened. So, yeah, I think that's a candidate to come back. You know, I thought he played decently here. Philadelphia obviously thought he played decently enough to sign him. Now, you know, they made their own decision in cutting him. So, but I'm not. You know, Keon Smith played pretty well the last preseason game, and you're sort of waiting to see something from him. And then Larry Bourne, I'm not really sure what they got there. So, you know, is Kendall Lamb better than Larry Bourne? You know, these are the decisions that, you know, Bill Belichick used to always say the left half of the roster is what wins Super Bowls, and you stick around long enough, you see what he's talking about. He's exaggerating a little, but you see what he's talking about.
So that explains why we haven't won one in a while. That's just it.
Well, that's part of the reason.
We'll probably get into some more as this episode goes on.
And to rewind a little bit, going from the kind of turnover of the roster a little bit, you know, exports, imports, what were your thoughts about the off-season moves?
Well, or non-moves, right? Really, there weren't a lot of big moves, and look, I understood what they were doing, and I kind of liked their fiscal conservatism for once, not going overspending and saying, okay, we're going to put the pressure on ourselves to have a good draft and go back to building that way. Now, I was surprised when everybody knew that at some point they're going to trade Jalen Ramsey, and they never made a move for a cornerback, and so you can like Storm Duck, and you can like these guys that they kept, but we're talking roles at this point. Is Storm Duck a number one cornerback? Yeah, and on down the line, and Rasul Butler, for all the talk of, well, they got the proven veteran cornerback they need. I mean, he was ranked 102nd, I believe, in Pro Football Focus out of 116 quarterbacks last year. So again, we're talking roles. What do you expect of Rasul Butler? What do you expect of Storm Duck? You can only play so much zone at some point. So we talk about the offseason moves. I like some of the offseason moves, and at the same time, I look at the roster that they put together, and the flaws are big flaws. They're glaring flaws. The backup of the offensive line, the corner, the secondary as a whole, and you can like the front seven, the defense as much as you want, and they can talk. We're going to scheme. We're going to blitz. It's an 11-man defense and all that stuff. But there's a reason why cornerbacks are premier positions, why they're drafted very high and command a lot of money, in that you can only scheme so far. And that's what scares me about this season, really. If you're going in with guys playing out a role. So when you talk about the offseason, I was surprised that they traded Jalen Ramsey? You heard so much about the culture and all that it was either Ramsey or Tyreek Hill had to go, because those were the two biggest offenders for being late to practices, for not setting the right example, and they're at the top of the food chain. They are, with Tua, your three highest paid players. So I thought one of them would go. I was a little surprised it was Jalen, but and I was more surprised they didn't. It's hard to get a number one cornerback, but they didn't really even get somebody a veteran who could step in and they could cover for him, but he has a chance to at least cover that role.
So it's a good segue into talking about some of the position groups as a whole. Do you have a unit, a group, a room that is your clear-cut top, and then on the inverse, who is the clear-cut worst?
Well, I mean, your receivers are always going to be the clear-cut top to me when you have Tyreek and Waddle. They better be, because you've invested. That's how you built your team. You invest a lot of money in them. But as far as deep and talent, the linebackers, assuming, and this is a big assumption to make, Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb are healthy. Your front seven really on defense. You like what they did with defensive tackle. There was a hole they had, and they went out and they first round pick, fifth round pick, seventh round pick, and it looks like all of them have a chance right now. We'll see what happens, by the end of the year. But all of them showed something in preseason that say, okay, this is all of a sudden defensive tackle and nose guard. The interior of the defensive line went from being a question mark to, okay, we have some depth here, something to work with. So the front seven on defense, assuming health, assuming two things, not just health, but Bradley Chubb gets back to who he was. He's had a lot of injuries. Jalen Phillips had a couple major injuries. Are they still going to be the player who they were? Give them a little time to knock off the rust and all that. And then, are they healthy? But let's just say they are the front seven, and then the speed, the receivers on offense, you got to make them be your strength.
Yeah. Thanks for everybody in the chat. The chat's giving you some love, Dave. Everybody, as Lou said, please hit that thumbs up, hit that bell, subscribe. We're with Dave Hyde, columnist for the Sun Sentinel, going over the 53-man cut, and also taking a look a little bit on the 25 season. You mentioned the rookie class, Dave. This to me, from top to bottom, I'm not used to this. From top to bottom, there could be 5-6 contributors in this class. These are kind of franchise stabilizing drafts, something we wish, this is the kind of draft you wanted in the beginning of the rebuild. It gives me a little hope, regardless of what happens this season, if it goes south or not, that this draft can kind of lead, if it's the next regime or next coach, you can build off this. When's the last time you've seen a draft class like this from top to bottom? I mean, there could be draft class with better players at the top, but from top to bottom, it gives us some hope for the future, regardless who's running it, right, Nick?
Yeah, I agree. They had a good summer, good preseason. A lot of these guys earned their time, like Ollie Gordon.
Yes.
He earned, he was third, fourth string, and there were injuries, but even before that, he earned that you want to see more of him in a bigger role. And he brings a lot of things that you were trying to do this offseason. Physical, short yardage was a real problem last year. So he helps that. I don't want to go too overboard and say,
right.
they've solved everything. They got a great deep rookie class. Look what happened today to the 22 class. Where Tyndall got cut and Ezukama got cut, and no surprise with either of them. And really the only one left standing. And it was to your point, I am agreeing completely with you that there's hope here. But Cameron Good is the only one standing from that. And that was the couple years where they really had a diminished draft class. And so, the Dolphins' philosophy on what they're doing is making me dizzy here between, tanking and then building through the draft to they don't care at all about the draft, spending money, and they were trying to win in that very defined window, and now they're back to building through the draft. But to your point, I agree with you that you saw some things that you wanted to see and were glad to see from these rookies, and they're going to get the question becomes, are they showing signs of getting a chance? Jason Marshall, for instance, going to be the starting slot cornerback. Is he getting that out of because he's shown signs that he can play there? I'm sure there's some of that, but it's also roster desperation. Okay, they between injuries and Mike Hilton obviously didn't show him anything. They were in a spot where they needed to find someone to play slot cornerback, and now, well, he's never played that before, not in college, not in high school, he said. So, but he's getting his chance, and you can see why they like him there. And now the question becomes, okay, when the big lights go on, is he ready? Is he ready? Not is he, is he good, but is he ready for that from opening day? And not, look, the Chargers ended the last year with 2 fifth-round rookie cornerbacks and made the playoffs. So it can be done. The difference is they had a couple months to sort of ease into the NFL and watch it. Jason Marshall, right from day one, is going to be asked to go out and play well.
Yeah, you mentioned, it seems like you lead me into every question. We're thinking on the same wavelength. I get confused what the plan was. I said this surprisingly, and people kind of opened their. I thought the mistake, honestly, in the rebuild was the bunch of draft picks trading for Tyreek Hill. They should have took Sewell. You don't need the speedy outside weapons are the last thing to come. We'll talk about Greer in the end of the episode here because I got my thoughts on him. But I'm trying to figure out the plan. You said it. Load up on the picks, all the picks, then F the picks. Let's be the Rams. We can't do that. So they kind of couldn't do the rebuild right. They couldn't do the F the picks veteran route right. What is the plan? Where are they at this year? Is it a kind of a transition reset? See where we are? Because it seems like they just do things on the fly. That's been my biggest problem with this organization. I just don't understand where they're going. That's why I have a hard time figuring out what this record is going to be. I don't know what I'm looking at sometimes,
Yeah. I think we're back to normal franchise of we're going to build through the draft. We're going to, get young talent and and build that way. You know, they really had no other option. Let's be honest. They're up against the salary. They had spent so much money on these guys, and they had the least draft capital in NFL history for 2 drafts. And you know, you talk about depth and salary cap problems. There you go. So they went for it in that really truncated window there, and they didn't win, obviously. And whereas the Rams and the Buccaneers, they won when they went for it. Okay, so now they're back to being fiscally conscious, and to be honest, Brandon Shore in the front office had got more say this offseason as far as how to spend money, and let's not go crazy with spending money. And so I think they're going to get the salary cap spending under control, get some minimum rookie salaries in there to work with, and that way they're going to have options to, however the season goes. They're not going to be, we traded all our draft picks and our salary cap's a mess. I think they were responsible this offseason.
To be fair, I think they were probably forced. You said their hand was forced. You mentioned Brandon Shore. We've heard that. I want to. How involved is Garfinkel on the football side of things? Because he's kind of a forgotten man. I've heard a lot. He's more involved than people think on the football side. You know any of kind of how the inner workings are? Is he involved in the football side at all? Because he's done
sure.
job on the business side.
I mean, he was. It was his. He was the one who pushed the tank, and Steve Ross listened to him, and they tanked. And so he has say. It's an ever evolving process in there. Who has Steve Ross's ear? And like I said, Brandon Shore got to step up more this offseason. I think that's a good thing because in retrospect, I'm with you on Tyreek Hill. When you invest in these guys, Jalen Ramsey, Tyreek Hill, nothing they've done has really surprised you from on the field and off the field, and their personalities and inside the team. When you're going to make these guys the highest paid guys on your team, they got to be responsible citizens too. I mean, they got to lead the team in the right way, and they were the 2 biggest problems last year. Not just because they were problems, we'd be watching, team stretching, and here they come out late for practice. But these are the 2 best players on your team, probably too, and everybody looks at them like, "What's going on?" So when you say a team, your best players not only have to play the best, you want them to be the best representatives of how a pro is supposed to act. And Mike McDaniel turned over, as he called his players' teammates, and said we're a player-led team and all this stuff. Well, there's your leading men, so when people wondered undisciplined on the field and all this stuff, there it is. There's the issue. So they had to reset as much as they could this offseason in the 4th year of Mike McDaniel, and we'll see how it goes.
I like the word reset. I think that's a cleaner word than like rebuild. A reset seems great. And then you say Brandon Shore, fiscal responsibility. The man was like a human resources CPA kind of background guy. So this is probably the right guy to work more with the books. But since last season, the cliche, culture change, identity, do you see it? Are you buying into that? Do you think the Dolphins are turning that tide right now with a culture shift at the moment?
Well, you see some change. For instance, Mike, the first few years, never had referees at practice. Now there's some referees. You see, there were rotating players were rotated on days off. And I called around the league to other writers when I heard Mike was doing this the first year, and I said, "Is this going on in the league?" Because I know the NFL is trying to figure out what they want to do in training camps, right, in preseasons. In this new era. So I thought, well, maybe this is a new thing, but nobody else was doing. Nobody else was saying, okay, these 4 players will have today off, these 4 tomorrow, these 4. So he's stopped that. Now, sometimes veterans do get days off, but it's not a choreographed thing. So, and look, they went and they practiced against Chicago and Detroit. Detroit, very physical team. That was for a purpose. So, are there differences? Absolutely, there are differences this year. Do I believe there's a huge culture change? Let's get to November when they hit a rocky road, and we'll see where we are with all this stuff.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you talked about, Mike, and you mentioned Mike, and I always looked at Mike as kind of an experiment. This is when I went into practice a few weeks ago, and I looked at Mike, and you see a guy who you can't imagine him kind of demanding the respect from his players. You just see him on the field, it just looked like, he's just one of the guys. This is year 4 now into Mike McDaniel, the ultimate player coach, the guy who's, just like one of the boys. Where do you stand on the whole Mike McDaniel experiment as we head into year 4 with Mike?
I so wanted this to work, and I still want it to work. I really did, from the standpoint what you said. He doesn't look like an NFL coach. He doesn't act like an NFL coach. He doesn't sound like an NFL coach. And I thought this would be, I'm on some level, it'd really fascinating to see.
Oh, we lost. Did we lose Dave? We lost Dave. We'll get him back up.
We'll get him back up there.
We'll get him back up. So, guys, we
talking about Mike McDaniel. Hopefully, it's not hopefully this is not a foreshadowing.
Anyways, let's just recap what we're doing. We have columnist Dave Hyde joining us from the Sun Sentinel. Dolphins cut down their 53-man roster today. They also signed Rasul Douglas. While we're waiting for Dave, Jason, what is the most surprising of the number? Is it the 8 offensive linemen? Is it the 9?
He's back.
Wait, we got Dave back. Hold on, Dave. Let me bring you back up here. All right, we're back.
All right.
The whole studio hopefully that's not foreshadowing during the Mike McDaniel conversation.
Was that Garfinkel sending the signal to get you off?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Right, I got to be looking out over here.
Because he's the smartest guy. Where were we at?
Mike, we were talking about Mike, and he had interesting ideas, and it was almost an experiment in the NFL in some regard, and some of his ideas. This, like last year, I wrote columns about this. There's this culture of comfortability, is what I called it. That I've never seen a team that has accomplished nothing look so comfortable and act so comfortable in training camp and preseason. Some of that's gone this year. They're not so comfortable, and they shouldn't be. But I thought they had this air about them last year of, oh yeah, we're great, or we're all, everything's going to be perfect and good, and I see training camp where Atlanta Falcons, maybe it's Washington, after the joint practices running sprints, and the Dolphins are just kind of lollygagging after practice and talking and doing nothing. And so Mike's had all these experimental ideas, and I think he realized they didn't work, and I got to change. And so he's tried to change within his personality this offseason. And you see some of the changes I mentioned earlier at training camp and preseason. But ultimately he is who he is, and he's either going to win that way or he's not going to win that way.
Yeah, I believe they're trying to do this whole culture change shift. I just find it hard is Mike is who he is. You're not going to – we kind of refer him here as like the substitute teacher. He's the substitute teacher. He's the boss you have, but you can be on your cell phone while you're at work, not the boss that comes in, and you're like, oh, crap, I got to work hard today. There's a fine line between fear and respect, and, that's a line that it's very hard to walk. I just don't know, Dave, if players will buy a 180 churn, all of him being – I just don't – I don't think it'll work.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, That's the question. And I, you know what, same with Greer, and we talk about, so many people talk about leadership on the Dolphins. Oh, the players need to lead, the players, who's going to lead, Calais Campbell's gone, and who's going to lead the defense, and et cetera, et cetera. You know what, the leadership problem is really Steve Ross. He has trouble identifying who's a good leader to run the team, to set the tone for the organization. What is the Dolphin way? We're 10 years into Chris Greer as GM and running drafts, so 7 years with as running the show. I don't know what he thinks winning football is. So the blueprint, and I think they've got back to it a little this offseason. They said we need to get more physical on the offensive lines, and they did. Look how they drafted. Look how they went out and got players. So I think there's more intent and purpose and direction this offseason than I've seen in a while. Now, is it too late is the question.
Yeah. You mentioned that. I was going to save this question for later, but I'll do it now. I've always said it's not a franchise left tackle, a franchise quarterback. This team needs to find their Bill Zito. They need to find a guy who's a leader, who can, the plan. He's got conviction. There's no wishy-washy. You're not putting it down to somebody else. He's a leader, identifies talent, to me, Greer's biggest problem, he's an average GM to me. He can identify talent. The problem is he doesn't know how to put the puzzle pieces in the right order. And that's where I think, for example, if local fans know the hockey, what a difference that GM made. He basically turned this to a hockey town. That's the biggest one. You mentioned it with Steve Ross. That's the biggest thing they haven't identified. The leader, the personnel guy, and then down forward, everything works. I think that's why we're sitting in this merry-go-round of mediocrity, Dave. I think you need to hit the nail on the head on that one.
Yeah, I've written, look, when Pat Riley came in through the door for the Heat, everything changed. Okay. Now, we knew who Pat Riley is. When Bill Zito came in, nobody knew who he was, the door for the Panthers. Everything changed. When you look at that was that line of demarcation. Dave Dombrowski for the Marlins, they won a couple World Series off players. So you could. It doesn't matter the sport. It doesn't matter the business. One guy needs to come in the door and set the tone and make great decisions. And the Dolphins haven't found that guy.
Yeah.
So looking, go ahead, George.
Go ahead.
Well, it's still Mike McDaniel related. Do you see a scenario this year in which he doesn't make it through? They have a middle of the season gauntlet going into that bye. You got Baltimore, Buffalo, trip to Spain and Washington. If they don't successfully come into the bye with a record over 500 or even worse, do you see a scenario where there could be an in-season coaching move?
Well, look, he's under fire. Chris is under fire, right? We all know that. I'm not breaking news here. The seed under both of those guys is pretty hot. So you can draw up a scenario where they couldn't make it. I don't expect that will happen. I don't think Steve Ross, he did it with Joe Philbin. But, you can draw parallels here and there. But you know what? Their schedule is, the way it would happen, their schedule is fairly nice for the first half of the season. And so they need to come out of that first half with a nice record, whether it's 500 or, 6-3 or something like that. I don't know. But I don't think that's going to happen this year, but trust me, I've been around long enough to know that everything happens with the Dolphins. So, that is an option.
Yeah, I think you said that first half is pretty not easy. You never know, but then they get in that gauntlet of those 3 games, ending in Madrid. I want to talk to you a little bit about Tua and more of this clearly now this year, more than any, you see his confidence. This is his team, right? The way he handled the Tyreek stuff. This is a confident Tua. How do you think that the whole Tyreek Tua thing was handled by Tua, and kind of how do you think they handled the Tyreek situation in general the right way?
I think I liked how Tua's handling it from the standpoint he's being honest. He's telling you what he thinks instead of making the. For instance, he was in I think it was a Chicago game. He was interviewed during the game on TV, and it was just a lob question about his relationship with Tyreek, and he could have said, "Look, we're on the same page. We can't wait till opening day." He could have said a million things. Instead, he said it's still a conversation, and saying basically it's an ongoing process. So, look, Tyreek quit in the game. He said he wanted to be traded. He was a problem all year last year. So why would, if you're the leader of the team, you just say, hey, everything's great, he's back. Tyreek didn't practice much in OTAs. He wasn't around much. He then ran those 200-yard sprints, and then he hurt his oblique. We haven't really seen him. I'm not doubting that he can still be. He's still the best player on the offense. I'm not doubting that. And the offense will revolve around him. I'm not doubting that. But if you're in that locker room and there were so many issues last year, you want to see him, be the guy who he talked about he wants to be at the start of training camp. He went out and said, he said everything right. Tyreek did everything right, and that's the guy he wants to be. Now, when he comes out of a game and he's got 2 catches and 3 targets, and is he going to be that guy? And I think that's what Tua is holding him to, and I like that Tua is being honest with his answer in that.
Sticking in the quarterback room, Dave, last year Tua misses 6 games. They go 2-4 in those games, so they addressed on paper so far the backup quarterback with Zach Wilson with Quinn Ewers. What are your thoughts about those 2 guys and the overall room as a whole?
Well, I mean, the job is Zach Wilson's. I get everybody's happy with, it's almost a training camp cliche, isn't it? The 3rd string quarterback, everybody's, and I get it. I saw what Quinn Ewers did, and I said, yeah, look, that looks good. That looks good. But you put $6 million in Zach Wilson and all the energy, and you're giving him the reps with first, second teams a lot in practice and some preseason. That's your guy. And my question there is, what does Mike see that Sean Payton didn't in Denver? Forget the Jets. The Jets are an awful organization, and you've seen quarterbacks come out of there and go on and have good careers, right? And Sam Darnold and Geno Smith, and so why couldn't Zach Wilson be the next in that line? What scares me a little is Sean Payton didn't even dress him last year in Denver. He was a 3rd string quarterback, and he was a 3rd option even this offseason when Sean signed a player. So what didn't he see, and what do the Dolphins see that? So, and I'm waiting to see how this plays out, because and talk to Zach this summer, and I get it from his perspective. He wanted to go to a place that wanted him. He needed that. He needed a team to believe in him, and Mike believed. He said Mike believed him, and now you could tell he needs his confidence rebuilt. And of all the intangibles in pro sports of leadership and this and that, confidence is something I really believe in that goes up and down even at this level. And Zach Wilson needs his confidence rebuilt, and maybe it's being the process began, I'm sure, over the past several months. So they're in a better spot than last year. I'm curious, but I don't know. It's kind of a wild card with Zach Wilson. I'm not sure what to expect when if he has to go into a game.
So looking at everything, Dave, I know everyone or a lot of people are like, all right, there's 1 Super Bowl winner and 31 failures, but in this particular case, where do you put the bar at what would be a successful season for the 2025 Miami Dolphins?
The sad part, I've been thinking about this. they've had this massive rebuild where they tanked and they went out and spent all this money. The 7-year colossal rebuild, and the bar is one playoff win.
It's the same as when it started.
And it's not even like, well, we're building towards something, big. It's can they make the playoffs and win a playoff game? And you know my thought always, and when a new regime comes in, is every year you have to keep building towards something. Playoffs and a playoff win. Then you're building toward contention. We're not even get to that secondary parts of that. We're still with, can they make the playoffs and possibly win a playoff game? And I guess that's the bar this year, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what hypothetically they win that playoff game? Are we just throwing a boat parade for Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer?
Well, yeah, right.
He won the Super Bowl, guys.
Yeah, he's done what 25 years of Dolphins season haven't. So it would be an accomplishment. I guess we were talking about the draft and everything. I guess the difference with this year, at least, if they have a good year, they're getting a lot of help from young players between last year's draft and this year's draft. It's just got to happen. I mean, that's what's going to happen. And so you would feel, let's all close our eyes and see the end of the rainbow where they win a playoff game. It would feel like they're building towards something at that point. And the way, if they do that, then that means Tua has a good year. And a lot of these guys where you're on the fence, where their careers, there would be good answers for them. So maybe they would be building towards something then, I guess is what I'm saying. And that's sort of the way out for this regime right now.
Yeah, you mentioned something. I just thought of this now. A quarter cent, 25 years is kind of this merry-go-round. If you would put I know it's hard. There's different regimes. If you put your finger on what caused this, what is the one? If you could pinpoint one thing, is what, Dave? I mean, I guess we'd be the GM of the team if we knew that answer. Because
you know what? Let's go with Steve Ross. I can't think of a football hire he's made that's been inspired. Okay, so we can go back to Wayne Huizinga. Wayne Huizinga, I thought, made inspired choices that didn't always work out how he wanted. Look at Nick Saban. I mean, didn't everybody wanted Nick Saban at the time? And he's proved. He went back to college and proved. Then he gets Bill Parsons. But you talked earlier about Bill Zito. That's the guy they got to find. Now, everybody's looking for Bill Zito right now, right? The guy who's got the Midas touch. He doesn't make a bad trade. He doesn't make a bad move for the franchise. And even when they made the playoffs for the first time and they won a series for the first time in 2 decades, he said, no, that's not good enough. And he fired the coach, ripped up that model of winning and said it's too finesse. We'll never win in the playoffs that way. And so, but those guys are hard to find, and I don't know who that guy is. You got to comb the NFL and look around and try to find the Howie Roseman. Even Philadelphia didn't know they had Howie Roseman. They put him in the pasture for a year and sat him down, said you're not good enough, and then brought him back. But when you say where to go, I always say the quarterback, but more and more I think, or Bill Walsh used to say, I've written this line: organizations make quarterbacks. And I get what he's talking about now. A good organization. Look at Baker Mayfield, was awful in Cleveland, awful in, I think he went to Charlotte then, and now he's in a pretty good organization. And he's a pretty good quarterback now. And you look around the Jets guys I mentioned again. So they need that one guy to walk in the door.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with it. That's where I'm leaning to now is kind of what you just said. I want to wrap up this 225 season, this Dolphins season. I want to talk a little bit about your book, some of the books that you've written. if I tell you percentage Greer or McDaniel or both or either one are back next year, who's more likely to not be back, Greer or McDaniel?
I think it's a package deal. I think they're married, they're tied at the hip in the way, and the way they should be. They've made joint decisions and they worked well for the most part together, and that's something that that's something that's good that this franchise hasn't always had. That the coach and the front office are working together. So I think they either stay or they go.
Is Tua in that package for you? Is he part of that package? Is it a three-headed package?
Oh, I think so. I think from the standpoint, I mean, he's separate, but if they don't have a good year and the coach and the GM go out the door, let's face it, that suggests that Tua's not having a good year. He's on the last year of have one more year before there's an exit ramp on his contract. And whoever comes in the door, do you want to invest in Tua would be the question. And if you just got a coach and GM are going out the door in part because of his play, you're probably not going to invest in him. So he is a separate question, but you lump him into the same package, yeah.
Let's hope that's not the case. I mean, people think you'd be negative. It's just there's a lot of questions. We want them to win, but I know I'm scarred. This is what I expect every year. But yeah,
you know how bad it is though covering this team year after year. I feel like I'm stepping in the elevator. These are good guys. I mean, I can go down the line of people I got. Tony Sperano and go down, and not just the head coaches either, the other people. I feel like I'm getting in the elevator at times, and it's always going down. Can the elevator ever go up?
Yeah.
I want it to go up.
I started this show, a year ago, and I feel it covering it. I haven't even gotten to this season. It's not fun not covering a winner. I can tell you. I
used to tell the New England Patriot writers, not so much anymore, but you guys write books and we write obituaries.
Oh,
that's a great line, man.
That is a good line. And before we're gonna obviously ask for a record prediction, but before that, and I know elevator fun stuff aside, what's been your last 2 or 3 decades? What's been your best moments covering? It could be a game, could be a month period. What is the moment that sticks out and says, "Man, this is the life right now"?
Whew, the best moment of
probably got to go back pretty far, Dave.
yeah. I mean, there are. I'm trying to think. What's the? I mean, like the. I can't pull out a single moment, but the best thing covering this team, other teams, is over years you develop a relationship with people. Okay, and not so much with people anymore in that they're 3 years and gone. Everybody, and so that's really to me that's the downside of a mediocre / losing team is guys don't stay around long enough. You get to know them. Like the Marinos and the of course Jimmy Johnson was with UM and with the Dolphins. The Jason Taylor, Zach Thomas, those type of guys. Who's the next Hall of Famer from the Dolphins? Is he on the roster? So I mean, there are moments like the Miracle Miami that day. That was such a fun moment. The touchdown. I guess it would come to stuff like that more than. And then small conversation with players. Kendall Lamb was brought up. He's a very smart guy, very interesting guy to talk to. So sometimes you get surprised and stuff like that. But let's be honest, the moments that are fun all happen with winning teams. I mean, the Panthers. I was just talking today to the guy from the NHL, who called the keeper of the cup. He goes around with the Stanley Cup to the players as they get the cup for one day. and that's his job. And I thought, God, what a great job! Every day you're making everybody happy, by bringing in the Stanley Cup. So that's what's missing from the Dolphins, stuff like that.
Yeah. Real quick before you go, Jason. Here, you mentioned stories. I'm sure you got to eat. The ones I'm most fascinated are the draft stories. Those are the ones that I'm most fascinated. I mean, you don't have to give us any, but has there been some like draft stories that you're like people would be shocked to hear, or they don't know about, or player X, or this was going to happen, or those to me are the most interesting stories because you hear so much stuff after the fact, but you don't know what's real and what's not.
Yeah. I mean, here's one that I've written that always strikes me because of the importance it was to the Dolphins when Dan Marino was drafted. Ken O'Brien was drafted, I think 2 before Marino, and when the Jets announced that they were taking Ken O'Brien, Don Shula turned to the I'm drawing a blank on the personnel director's name, the rifleman we call him, Chuck Connors, and he's they announced O'Brien's pick for the Jets, and Shula turned to Chuck Connors and said, "Who's he?" So a different era. But
right, the Dolphins.
Yeah. That fell to their benefit. There are a lot of more recent story. There's nothing jumps out of the recent drafts that we all know the Minka Fitzpatrick and Lamar Jackson from was that 2016 was it 18? Yeah, where Steve Ross injected the idea to take Minka Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, I know. How about this idea? Trade back up. Take Fitzpatrick, then trade back up. That's the power move, Dave. The conviction move.
There you go.
That's what there you go. Do, right?
I was pounding the table for Lamar Jackson that year, and
a lot of people were. Yeah,
a lot of people were.
Yep. Now you mentioned Jimmy Johnson, and you obviously know a lot about that from the book you wrote. Swagger, Super Bowls, and brass balls. Can you talk about that and some of your other works, and of course the '72 book?
Yeah, well, you know what? I went down to interview Jimmy. He was going in the Hall of Fame, and I said I'd actually been working on a book on Don Shula and had trouble selling it to a publisher, and my agent said, "You got anything else?" And I said, "I'm going down to talk to Jimmy Johnson." I thought my plan was to do Shula and then ask Jimmy. He goes, "Well, ask Jimmy now." So at the interview, I asked Jimmy, "Hey, you ever thought of doing a book?" He did one early in his Dallas run, and I go, a book of what, more on, evaluating players and why people, all these GMs and coaches, not just in the NFL, but the NBA, were coming down and talking to Jimmy and Isla Morada. And I said, what do they come to talk to you about? What do they want that you got? And write about, let's do a book. And he looked in the air for like 3 seconds and he goes, okay, let's do it. And I said, well, what do you think about it for a little bit? But no, it was a great time. It was, he made it like, look, you meet Jimmy, post-football coach Jimmy, and he's great. He's a great person. He was a great personality as a coach. He was just driven. As he even said, I didn't like that person, the person he had to be. But it was, as you can imagine, it was a lot of fun. I also did a book on the '72 Dolphins. That was a lot of fun, called Still Perfect, and interviewed all of them except Jake Scott. And I convinced my editor at the Sun Sentinel a couple years later to send me out to Hawaii and try to talk to Jake Scott. And that's how I ended up spending a weekend. I went to Jake's house. He came out on the porch. This is in Kauai, Hawaii. And he came out on the porch and he said, I tell you, he said who I was, what I wanted to do. And he never give interviews. And he's known for like violence. So it wasn't like sure thing, things were going to go well here. But he said, I tell you what, meet me at the Tahiti Nui bar at 5 o'clock And so went in at 5 o'clock, and I left about 2 in the morning. And if you ever seen the movie The Descendants with George Clooney, Jeff Bridges is sitting in the Tahiti Nui bar in a seat, and beside him are 2 native Hawaiians. And those 2 native Hawaiians were the guys every day at 5 o'clock would sit beside Jake Scott in that bar. He sat in the seat Jeff Bridges did. And so it's so anyways, there's been a lot of great stories come out of the Dolphins for me, and great friendships and relationships with, almost more so when guys are done with their careers.
See, those stories, I mean, I love the history of the Dolphins. I know I started in the 90s, but I absolutely am enamored with that. So that's great stuff, and great stuff on the book. And now maybe the smiles are going to turn to frowns. Got to ask you about a record prediction.
I predicted 8-9 in the Sun Sentinel, so let's be consistent and go there. And I got to admit, I don't know if I'm being optimistic or pessimistic. This season can go either way, and they need a lot of things to come in for them to go 10 wins. Health of the offensive line, they gotta have some answers that aren't obvious in the secondary. And so I picked 8 wins. My problem is you can't go into a season having glaring problems. And I see some strengths that you gotta like. I see some young guys. Last year's draft, I like Patrick Paul at left tackle. I like some of the moves they made. But I can't get beyond some of the glaring problems.
Yeah, it seems like we could probably copy and paste that 8 or 9 win record prediction. Unfortunately,
for the last 20 years.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dave. I don't have
right in the middle.
Mule. If you told me they won 11 games or you told me they won 7, I wouldn't be surprised either way. I don't see them being as bad. People saying they were top 3. No, 2 is a floor. 2 gives you a floor. When you have 2 healthy, you're always going to be 8-9 win team, but I kind of agree with you on that. Well, Dave, I can tell you how I appreciate all the time. We've gone 52 minutes. I wasn't expecting to give us this much time. And when I truly say, Dave, you are one of the best sports columnists. I've covered you all. I've watched you and watched your work and read your work for a very long time. I thank you so much for coming on our little show here with Jason and I. And before you go, plug anything that you got going on, or where they can find you or find the work that you're doing, or any articles you got coming out.
Yeah, nothing. If you're interested in Dolphin history, like I said, the book's still perfect. You can get it on Amazon. Swagger, I did a book with Marino, a coffee table book mainly, but it was a lot of writing too. So those are the, then just the daily Sun Sentinel grind. I love it when people say they can't get beyond the paywall, and I'm like, hey, we got to make money too.
It's like 1 cent.
It's worth it to get behind that paywall. I'll tell you that, 1,000%.
Yeah, everybody, please, all the local. I mean, what is it? It's like what $1 a month most of the time. It's
yeah. I mean, they're always running some type of bargain that I can't understand. How are we making any money doing this? But you look. Keith Sims used to be a big coupon clipper. So, have a little Keith Sims and you look for the bargains.
I love that. Great anecdote on that.
All right, Dave, thank you so much. Again, I appreciate it so much. And maybe we can do this again sometime during the season.
All right, sure. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys.
Thank you so much, Dave.
For Dave, for Jason, for myself, we're out, guys. Fins up. We'll see you next time.